A few years ago, I ran the Dallas Marathon, and when you run a marathon, at some point you're at the starting line, and you have to wait until they blow the starting whistle, or in Dallas they shoot the starting gun or whatever. And when you wait there, you have nothing to do but kind of look around. And so I was there and I was looking around, and you look at all the other runners and you hope that they don't look as fit as you, but they usually do, at least. And you look at their gear and what they're doing. And one of the things I noticed in Dallas is known in the States as the buckle of the Bible Belt. So a lot of people had scripture verses on their arms or on their legs. And one of those verses that was written a lot on people's legs was Isaiah 40:31. It's a beautiful verse for running marathons, and this is what it says. It says, "Those who hope in the Lord," so we have our topic of hope, "they will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary, and they will walk and not be faint." That's what you need for a marathon, don't you? Run and not grow weary. What a beautiful verse to run a long run like that. Unfortunately, this is not what our text here is really talking about, because in context you will see that verse 30 says nothing like, if you ever run a marathon and you hope in the Lord, you will run and not grow weary. And the text doesn't also say anything like, if your favorite football team is playing Champions League and they only trust in the Lord or hope in the Lord, they will win every game. That's not what it's saying. The verse is in context a lot more beautiful, and I think a lot more applicable for all of us. So that's what we will look at today very briefly. We'll look at three things here. First, why hope is necessary. Second, what hope is based on. And third, what does hope accomplish? And we'll dive straight in here. And as we dive in and we'll see why hope is necessary, we'll see immediately that this is not talking about anybody running a marathon kind of at the pinnacle of their existence. This verse is written to Israel as it is in an incredibly hard place of suffering. Very different, right? Kind of the pinnacle of existence. I'm able to run a marathon and in a hard place of suffering. So we see what is said here to Israel, about Israel in verse 27. It says, "Why do you complain, Jacob? Why do you say, Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord? My cause is disregarded by my God." That's kind of crazy, because that suffering here that Israel is going through, that makes them say, after everything they've experienced with God, it makes them say, He must not see me. My ways must be hidden from Him, because what I'm going through right now is so incredibly hard. And I wonder where God is. So this is the context for our verse. Interesting, huh? A little different than the marathon thing that we had here. So Israel is in a long season of suffering. And we could have gotten a clue already about this when I read the verse. I read the first part of the verse 31 here again. It says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength." It doesn't say those who trust in the Lord. It says those who hope in the Lord. And those are two concepts that are very similar and are sometimes used as synonyms, but I think there's a decisive difference. And I want to show you the difference. Dan, if you can come up real quick. Perfect. So many of you know the concept of a trust fall, and many of you have done trust falls. You don't know me super well yet, Dan, so this will be fun. Yeah. So we'll see how much you trust me. So Dan, if you just face this way, and we'll practice a trust fall, okay? And I mean, I've talked with Dan before, and to be quite honest with you, we've practiced this a little bit. And he's probably seen my biceps, yeah. And this guy can certainly catch me. And now I'm asking him to trust me, okay? Okay, Dan, so come and fall and trust me. No. Okay. Wow, okay, that's helpful, thank you. So this is what I call a trust fall, what just happened, okay? I was right there and I caught him. We're doing another type of fall, and I'm going to call it a hope fall. Dan, are you ready to come again? Okay, come for your hope fall. Okay. Thanks, Dan. I'm glad I was able to catch you here. Okay, so I think there's a decisive difference between those two falls. The first one, he was very much in the present. Yeah, he's present and past-oriented, you could say. He trusted me because he knew I was here. He's probably thinking, hey, he's here for his interview weekend. He's not gonna, pull one of those where he lets me fall, So there's a lot of things that could make Dan trust me and help his trust. When I was letting him fall the second time, he fell a lot longer. And probably what happened after he did the trust thing, like about halfway, he then started to kind of move over into hope. And when you hope, you kind of have to balance different things out, yeah? So maybe he's thinking, on the one hand, he's strong and I saw his biceps. On the other hand, I don't know how good he is at math, and does he know that my weight and velocity and whatever? Like, has he done those calculations? Or maybe as he was falling, at some point he notices the floor is coming closer and closer, and he thinks, well, this is his interview weekend, but what if he's preaching a super sermon about betrayed trust today? So, a lot could have happened, and I'm sure the farther he was falling, the more he was thinking about what really is going to happen. And I believe that hope, different than trust, is especially future-oriented despite the present situation. In the free fall of life, that's when we kind of have to start hope. When we are not quite as sure anymore, when it's not fun and games anymore, when there's suffering in your life, hope becomes even more important because it's not so clear at all points. God is there and he will catch me and everything will be fine. You have to ask yourself the question, why am I still falling? Why haven't I been caught yet? And I think that's where hope sets in, and that's what our text is talking about today. So I believe that hope is especially needed when we are in the free fall of suffering. And I wonder if you have experienced anything of that. Maybe you're experiencing it right now. You've just kind of had a hard week, or a hard month, or a hard year, or maybe a hard decade. And you kind of trusted in God, and you're still falling, and you don't know what's happening and why he hasn't caught you yet. And maybe you're in a situation as you keep falling, and you sometimes wonder, where is God? What did Israel say? The Lord does not see me. Yeah, he's disregarding what's happening with me. What is happening? And the text is talking exactly into this situation, into the situation when you think, is God just taking a good snooze up there right now, or why is he not doing anything? So hope is needed when we're in the free fall of suffering. That's why hope is necessary. The second question our text answers is, what hope is based on? And we have a beautiful verse here. It says, do you not know, have you not heard, the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. God is the everlasting God. He always was, he always is, and he always will be. He's the creator. He can do all things. Nothing is too difficult for him. And the part of this verse that struck me most is he will not grow tired or weary. When you first read this, that might not strike you as weird, but it is extraordinary when you look at the teachings of other cultures in the ancient Near East. There's a lot of teachings, and different nations have told their stories about their God. There's this epic here, the Atrahasis epic. You can actually see this in the British Museum, I believe, here in London. So very interesting, telling the story of the Akkadian gods in this epic. And the story goes about like this. There are many gods for the Akkadians, as they believed it. And those gods were just kind of laboring. They were creating. They were maintaining the earth and the world. And eventually, they just got tired. like working hard, you get tired, they got tired too. So they created humanity because they just didn't do all the work anymore. And humanity then came and they did the hard labor on the earth for them. And the gods just kind of withdrew and started resting. And as the story says, humanity prospered then. They increased in size and they did really well what they were doing. And the problem came in when the humans just became too many and too loud. Because their chief god, the god is called Enlil, he tried to sleep and slumber, but the humans were too loud and kept interrupting his sleep. So he got mad, he sent famines, and eventually a great flood. Fascinating, right? There's the story of God, as it is told in Akkadian history, that just needed sleep. He needed a break. Humans were exhausting. They were asking questions. They were loud, and he punished them for it. That's a very different story from the God of the Bible, is it? Where it says he will never grow weary or tired. I believe, by the way, that a lot of our modern inspirations, what you might call our modern gods, I believe they're also kind of sleepy. Asleep, you could maybe say. So currently living in Herzogenaurach, and when you drive into our city, the first thing you see is the Adidas campus. It's a huge campus, and then later you get to the Puma, and they always have like little inspirational messages on their outlet here. So right now, just in this season, it says, "You got this. You got this," and that's super encouraging because, sometimes you drive by Adidas and you are about to drive to a hard meeting and you read this and it just says, "You got this," and you feel like, "Oh yeah, great, now thank you, Adidas." Now I feel better about it. But let's be real about this. Like, who is saying this? Adidas is a company, right? And they try to be encouraging, but they don't know anything about me. What if I'm currently driving by and I'm applying for a job that I'm neither qualified for nor passionate in, nor should I have ever applied to this job, and I'm reading this little message and it says, "You got this." It can encourage me to a lot of wrong decisions. What if you're driving to your family at Christmas and you're about ready to let the bomb burst and really tell them your opinion, and you drive by there and it says, "You got this"? It's like I love Adidas, by the way. I'm not bashing on them. I just think Adidas is a lot better at making shoes than at giving us hope. They don't know you. They don't have consciousness as a company like that. So you could really say they're asleep, right? They don't know if you have this or if you should have this or if you can have this. It's just a nice little sentiment, but it's asleep. And if you use this as your source of inspiration and hope, you're trusting in something that's sleepy. And so I think that's what makes it so extraordinary that our text here says, God will not grow tired or weary. Yeah, he's fully conscious and he's fully awake. He knows exactly what you're going through right now. He feels your pain and he sees your suffering. He knows the end of it, and what's coming next. And he's just aware and awake. And I love that about God. I find it so encouraging. He's not sleepy. He's not sick of you. He's not getting tired of you. He's not getting tired of all of your problems and of all of your prayers that you prayed so many times. He's wide awake. He's wide awake. And he's listening at all times. He's not growing tired or weary. That's extraordinary that the Bible tells us that. And then it continues here. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. So he doesn't only see, but he does something. He's not only awake, he's also active in your life. I love this, by the way. He gives strength to the weary. He increases the power of the weak. God has somehow always sided with the weak and the weary. It's always been especially somehow on their side, on the side of the suffering. That's just what our God is like, and I think that's such a beautiful characteristic. So he gives strength to the weary. So he's not only aware, he's also active. He's doing things about it. That might look a lot different than what you might like it to look like or what you might expect. 2.5 years ago, I got a COVID infection, and I was doing fine during my infection. I just worked the entire time through it, and I thought I was going to get better. And one of the things that I noticed through my infection, after my infection, is that I wasn't getting better, I was getting worse. So I kind of waited after I was infected with COVID for 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks, and eventually I came to the point where I couldn't work anymore. I couldn't do any physical exercise anymore. I had to go on sick leave, and most of the time during that time, I was just in my bed. It was hard to move around in my bed even. Everything was just sore and was hard, and just a long season of long COVID that struck me. I couldn't work for a couple of months, and I slowly started to do a reintegration process where I first worked 2 hours, and I would be exhausted after working 2 hours, and then I started working 4 hours, and be exhausted after working 4 hours, and slowly I got better. So after 6 months, I was finally able to fully work again. Up to this day, 2.5 years later, I still cannot do any sports. I still cannot run. I still cannot go back to play my beloved football. And that's honestly really, really hard. I mean, I'm 33. I always said I'm going to play football till I'm 45. I don't know why people stop when they're 35, you know. It's just been like a long season of waiting on the God who I know is active and who's awake, but somehow he's not quite doing what I expect him to do. And I'm just wondering, and I'm waiting, and I'm hoping, and you know, like in this whole season that I'm kind of still in, you know, I'm fully able to work again, but I'm still not able to do sports, and I'm waiting. And to me, and I wonder if this is the same for you when you're in a situation of suffering, that's just encouraging to know that God is awake. I'm not suffering because he just doesn't know about it or because he's sleeping. And somehow God is active, even though he's not active how I sometimes wish he would be, where he just like, heals me. But I can trust that he's active anyway, and he's working in my life anyway, and he is. And that's just a huge encouragement to me, and maybe it is an encouragement to you as well. So God is awake and active, and that's what we can base our hope on. He's awake and he's active, and there's many ways in which God is active and awake. And one of those ways is now in our last verse that we are looking at, and that asks the question, what does hope really accomplish? And there it says, even the youths grow tired and weary, and the young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. So if we are able to trust that God is awake and active in our lives, it will sustain us through the suffering that we go through. It's a beautiful picture here. It says, they will soar on wings like eagles. When you hope in the Lord, you soar on wings like eagles. With eagles, it's very fascinating because they barely ever flap their wings. They just spread out their wings. They're huge. And the thermal winds that come up from the earth are enough that keep them soaring up there. They don't even need, strong winds or anything like that. It's just the thermal airflow, and they stay up there. So this is saying, if you are not able to flap your wings at the moment, if you're just tired and you're suffering, just spread out your wings and hope in the Lord, and he will help you to soar, to just stay up in the air without even having to do a lot. And it says, and we started with this too, they will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. I was kind of scratching my head a little bit when Chris gave me this verse, after you kind of know my long COVID story now. It's like, punching the guy that's already on the ground when he says, okay, Tim, preach about this verse. They will run and not grow weary. So how are you doing? Obviously, this is not talking about, marathon running here. This is just saying, this is a picture that the Bible is giving us here. And it's saying they will just be able to keep going even in their hardest suffering. Somehow hope will sustain them. This is, by the way, exactly what research will tell us today. Hope is incredibly important in our lives. There are so many studies done on hope. You can read some of those at home. I brought one. It's a study by K&G Long et al. It's published in Global Epidemiology. And it says this about hope. Yeah? It says, a greater sense of hope is associated with, and this is science, this is research, better physical health, reduced risk of all-cause mortality, fewer number of chronic conditions, lower risk of cancer, fewer sleep problems, and the list just continues and continues. That doesn't mean if you have hope, everything will go great and all your problems will go away, but hope really does change your situation. It can make so much of your life better. There's a story of Admiral Stockdale, written about in the book Good to Great. Some of you might know this story. He was a commander in the Vietnam War that the Americans were fighting in, and he ended up being imprisoned in one of the camps. So he was a prisoner of war in so-called Hanoi Hilton in Hanoi in Vietnam. The situation in prison was incredibly difficult. The prison was overcrowded, it was unsanitary, it was poorly ventilated. The prisoners were often kept in small and in damp cells. There was physical and psychological torture. The techniques that they used included beatings. They were tied up in stress positions. There was isolation and starvation. It was really incredibly difficult for the prisoners. And Admiral Stockdale, as one of the leaders of his people there, together with his prisoners, so he was in prison as well, he tried to somehow keep the morale up of his people that were there with him, and he tried to encourage them and teach them. And so he was there the entire time while they were all suffering so heavily, and just kind of watched how his people were doing and what helped them to keep going. And he was asked, after he was eventually released from prison, where many of his army colleagues died. Yeah, many died. Some came out alive. And he was asked, so what people made it out alive, and what people didn't make it out alive of the prison? And he said this. He said there's two groups of people that didn't make it out alive. The group number one that didn't make it out alive is the optimists. Because the optimists were the ones that said, everything will get better, and by Christmas we're going to be out. Christmas we're going to celebrate at home with our families. That's very optimistic, isn't it? And then Christmas came, and Christmas went, and they were still imprisoned, and they were crushed. And Admiral Stockdale, he said that, if you hope in something that just doesn't come true, that's just not true, you place your hope in something that's not trustworthy, not hope-worthy, it crushes you over and over again. So hoping in a snoozing source of salvation that has no consciousness is going to crush us over and over again. Yeah, driving by Adidas every day, telling me I got this, and then I don't have it, that's going to crush you after a while, because honestly, like, you got this, it's just not really trustworthy. So the optimists are the one who didn't make it out. The second group who didn't make it out were the pessimists. Those were the ones that had no hope whatsoever in prison. The ones that didn't see the end of the tunnel at all. That didn't believe eventually we will make it out. They also didn't make it out of the prison. So Admiral Stockdale says this. He says, you must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your reality, whatever it might be. And that's exactly what's true for our Christian faith, isn't it? There is suffering and hardship, and sometimes there is potentially too much of it. But somehow we trust that God will come and make everything right in the end. That eventually He will make everything right. So I summarized my sermon with this: hope in our sustainer is our sustenance in suffering. If you can hope in Jesus, who's truly trustworthy, it's just a small part that enables you to go through the hard things in life. That's especially what we celebrate at Advent as well. So Advent, one of our words for this season is hope. The Advent season throughout church history always had two sides to it. There was the one side where we celebrate the coming of Christ, that He came to this earth, He was born of a virgin, and He eventually died for our sin and resurrected again for our new life. But Advent doesn't just look back to His first coming, it also looks forward to His second coming. It's the firm belief that Jesus will come back, and one day He will put everything to rights. He will make everything right. And maybe you're here today and you just need to hear this. You're going through a season of suffering and you don't really know what to do and how to survive at the moment. I want to encourage you to trust in our wonderful God who is aware, awake, and active in your life right now. And His hope will sustain you in suffering. Let's pray. Jesus, thank You that we don't need to run after so many sources of insecure hope that are offered us every day in this world, but that we get to follow You as our wonderful God who is always aware and always active in our lives, who is truly trustworthy, who's worthy putting our hope in. Jesus, and that's what we want to do right now. We want to recognize that You're sovereign over everything, and that we truly can place our hope in You, that You will make everything right. Thank You for that, Jesus.